is Unapologetically Ashley, my podcast discussing topics such as dating, cooking, shopping, budgeting, and more, all with a disability. My goal is to show that, disabled or not, we are all the same, and while I may have a disability, it's not all of who I am. My name is Ashley, I'm 25 years old, and when I was born, the umbilical cord got wrapped around my neck 4 times with a knot, which cut off the oxygen to my brain, leaving me with a bunch of different disabilities, including CVI or cortical visual impairment, as well as a right hemiplegia, which is a type of cerebral palsy. Because I have both of these disabilities, oftentimes I can feel like an outsider, even within the disability community, like I'm trapped inside of a box. This can be quite isolating and lonely at times, and I can struggle with my disability, but at the end of the day, I'm just unapologetically Ashley. Hello and welcome to episode 8, Playing Sports with a Disability. In this episode, I'm going to be sharing my experiences playing sports with a physical and visual disability, highlighting some of the struggles I faced in school, as well as after I left school, just both in school and out of school experiences, playing sports, both group sports and just regular one-on-one type things. So let's get into what it was like for me to play sports with a disability. First, let's start with what it was like when I was in school. So when I was in school, it was a little bit challenging for me to play various different sports. For those of you who don't live in New Zealand, here in New Zealand we called it PE, and I think in like America and other countries you just call it gym class. So gym class or PE, we're going to start there. And I couldn't really play a lot of the sports that most of my classmates played due to both my physical disability and my vision impairment. It's always mainly my vision impairment that becomes an issue when it comes to playing sports, especially things like ball sports, which I really struggled with. Some of the sports we had to play in school consisted of softball and the shuttlecock game with the racket, and also there were a few other ones as well, like netball or basketball, where one team had to put on those bibs that were like different colors, so you had like those kind of vest type things. They were either like red or blue, and you'd divide the class in half and you'd play against each other in various different sports. So that was some of the experiences I had, and like I said, I played a few different sports. We did hockey at one point, so there were some that I could participate in, and then moving into like high school and things like that is when we played the more dangerous games like netball. For netball, because I am visually impaired and netball has slightly different rules to basketball, if you've ever played both, then you know. I haven't really played netball, but my sister played netball for years, and I did a little bit of basketball, which I'll get to later. But when it came to in school, there was one incident where I did have to play netball as part of PE class. So what we did for that was the teacher gave me a position that wasn't like right in the middle, and I didn't have to like worry too much about like all the different people around me and things like the ball hitting me and stuff like that. So it was a bit safer, but that was definitely one of the sports that I really did struggle with in school. One of my PE teachers was really great in high school. They actually thought of a few games that we could make up, so they weren't like real games as such, but they would come up with games where they were like, okay, how can we include Ashley? How can we make it so that these games are accessible for her? And so just to name off a few examples, instead of having those like colorful mats on the ground when we'd play things like t-ball, we instead would have like hula hoops. So hula hoop rings, if you know what I mean. So they just put hula hoops on the floor, and then I would get to use kind of like a few different options for different things. So when we did like t-ball, obviously for me to hit the ball, it's quite difficult. So rather than using like a regular ball that you'd use for like t-ball or for cricket or things like that, like the hard balls. We were never allowed to use the hard balls in school though, actually. I'm just going to say it was a softball. But instead of the softball, they would throw me tennis balls, for example, which are a little bit bigger. And then obviously there were a few other games like that. One teacher, like I said, actually invented a game. So basically what he did was take like a bigger ball, like say a beach ball. He tried out a few different balls actually. So there was like a beach ball, and then there was I think like a netball, like a hard like basketball or netball, and then I think there was like another like smaller kind of beach ball, and we would like throw the balls to each other, and then you would have to like run the bases. So instead of like hitting with a bat, you would like have to catch the ball and then run around, if that makes sense. So that was like a way to make it a bit more accessible for me. And obviously it didn't always work. Like I remember in high school, we were doing the shuttlecock game. I can't remember what it's called. Someone can let me know. But, you know, they had like the little round thing, and you'd hit it with the kind of, it looked like a tennis racket, but it was like smaller and skinnier, and then you'd hit the like different things with that. So you'd hit like the little shuttlecocks. It's like a little circle with like wings coming off of it, and you'd like hit it. But obviously it was really small and I couldn't see that. So my gym teacher at the time, what they did for that class was they set up a volleyball net, because if you know the game I'm thinking of, there's like a net that you have to hit the shuttlecocks over. So they set up one section just for me, and they, instead of giving me a racket and a shuttlecock, they instead just got a beach ball, or like a big kind of blow up ball, and then people in the class would have to rotate with me to play. So while everyone else was playing the games where like they would hit the shuttlecock with the like racket, people would have to rotate. So one person would be playing with me at all times and like hitting the ball back and forth with me over the net, and we'd be doing volleyball but with like a beach ball instead of like a hard ball, and we'd just like be tossing it back and forth, and then they would go and play their round of badminton. That's what it's called. Sorry, it took me a while to think of the name with the shuttlecock and the weird tennis racket type thing. But yeah, badminton, there you go. So they would play badminton and I would play volleyball, and they would rotate. So someone would be playing with me at all times. So they would start with one person and they would hit the ball with me back and forth for like a little while, and then they would rotate. So then someone else who was playing badminton would swap with them and play with me, and that's kind of what we did for that. That's probably one of the ones that stood out to me the most. I remember that game very vividly because around the time that happened, there were some other things happening in my life. So I remember that PE class very vividly because of that. Some of the stuff that I'm about to mention was still when I was in school, but it is just something that happened kind of separately from school. So some of it is while I was still actually in school, but it just wasn't really like a part of school, if that makes sense. I did soccer at one point, or for people in the UK, football. So for that, I did that as part of like a group with a bunch of other disabled kids that were in my school. So it was my school. In my school, we had this group called A1.1, and it's basically kind of like a room where all the disabled kids could hang out. And as part of that, they had like a special thing where we would like play sports and do other things as well. A lot of them were learning disabilities, and then I was kind of the odd one out with a vision impairment, but there were a few others that had like different physical disabilities as well. And so we played soccer as like part of something. Honestly, it's been years since I left school, so I can't give you the specifics of everything, but I do remember that we did play soccer as like a big group, and we were all in our school uniform, and we would go to different places and we would play soccer on different fields and things like that. It was very cool. And yeah, it was just like a group of us from school, everyone that was like in my high school, I think. And yeah, that was pretty fun. I still have some like pictures from it, and it was just like, basic stuff where we would just like hit the soccer ball. I didn't have like any special soccer ball. I know that when it comes to soccer or football, when it comes to disabilities, especially vision impairments or blindness, there is like blind sports, which I will get to. I never played like blind soccer. I just played regular soccer because, like I said, there were people of various different disabilities that would play with me. So it wasn't just like one thing, if that makes sense. But we also participated in something. Now, I don't know if this was part of the soccer thing or if it was a different thing. I can't remember. But there was something called the Special Olympics. And it's basically what it sounds like. And it was like a Special Olympics like day we'd go to different places. Again, I think my team was made up of my school, but don't quote me because I'm not sure. But there were different schools or different teams from like around all of Auckland or maybe even all of New Zealand, I'm not sure. And there were like varying different disabilities between the teams. And like I said, we would participate in that special day. And that was like kind of put on by the school, but it was like at different schools. And like I said, we would participate in different events. And again, I think that the soccer was a part of it, but I'm not totally sure because we did like a bunch of different sports. And it was with my school a lot of the time, like the kids from A1.1. So again, it gets a little bit jumbled in my brain, like trying to remember all of the different kind of sports that I did. I was really good at shooting. My dad got my sister a netball hoop that you put sand in the bottom and it like stands up on its own. It wasn't like one of those ones you screw into the wall. It was like it had its own stand. And a few years after he got her that one, he got me a basketball hoop. So my whole life I have been like, getting really good at shooting, and I found it really easy to like shoot. I've always been pretty good at like getting a lot of balls in. At one point I, actually made it into a game to see how many goals I could get, and that was like all at home. So obviously I was quite into playing basketball because I found the actual game of basketball or even netball to be quite tricky, but the shooting part I really liked. The most recent thing I did that I've made videos on was playing blind tennis. So for tennis, there are a few different things that people do for that, for playing blind. And one of those things is having the balls with noise. Now, like I said, for things like soccer, they can have balls with noise as well, but I never participated in that, but I know that they exist. But for tennis, that wasn't until I had a go with the noisy balls, the special tennis balls that made noise, so that you could hit it with the racket, and they had like a few different bounces, and like those were quite soft. I ended up just using the regular tennis balls because I didn't like the ones that made noise because they didn't like bounce quite as well, and also I couldn't see them because they were, I think, either green or black were the two colors that it came in, and green is obviously the same color as the court, and then the black was also really hard to see because I have no lower field and I have no peripheral vision, and then I also have bad depth perception and I can't see like straight this way. I have like gaps in my vision, so I already have black spots, so then you can imagine like I just kept missing it. So what they did instead, there are colors I can see and colors I can't depending on what kind of surface I play on. So if we're playing on that green kind of astroturf, then I need a color that isn't green. And then if I'm playing like on concrete, I can use the green balls. So the green balls are obviously the classic tennis balls. They are, quite powerful, quite fast. So they started me out with red balls, which I believe are for children. They're bigger and they're red and green. So I could see the red and I would just hit the red, and that worked quite well. And then I tried orange balls, which are a little bit smaller than the red balls. The red balls are soft and squishy, so they come really slowly and you can like hit them quite well, but they don't bounce as well because they're soft and squishy. And I think if they made red balls that were like the regular tennis balls, but they were just bigger, that would actually be perfect for me, because I found those balls to be the perfect size. I would hit them pretty much every time. They were really, really good for me to use, but they were just too soft, too squishy, and they wouldn't bounce properly. So you need the bounce of the regular tennis balls, but the bigger size, I think. I don't know if anyone can make that, but I have talked about that in the past in other videos, because I really, really think it would be a great way for people like me who still have the remainder of our sight, just making it a little bit easier for us, like a better way to adapt just by having bigger balls. Because like I said, when I played sports at school, like when I did PE, they would give me bigger balls to hit with for different things. So I do think that that is a great way to make it more accessible or easier for people who still can see quite a bit but struggle with things coming right at them, like balls specifically, because the smaller the ball, the harder it is to hit and find where to hit it. So I did that, and then I moved on to the orange balls, which are a little bit smaller. They're about the same size as a regular ball, but again, they're not quite as fast. My mum and my sister used to play tennis. My parents are really into tennis. They play tennis every Saturday and every Wednesday, and my mum especially was really into tennis. So growing up, she'd take my sister and I to the tennis court all the time, and I would just try and hit against the backboard all the time. I would just like hit the tennis ball against the backboard, because that time I could always like kind of hit it. But I was never actually good at playing the game. So when they came out with blind sports and they were talking about blind sport tennis, I was like, yes, I have to try that, because obviously due to my vision impairment, it's quite tricky for me to see the balls. But then because of my physical disability with my right hand, it was hard for me to drop the balls and then hit them myself. So I had to kind of learn how to do that, and it took a little while, but I ended up doing that, and it was a lot of fun. It was really great. And I think when it comes to different things, like getting your kids in early is really, really important, because when I was younger, like my sister was, as I said before, a very sporty kid. She'd play a lot of sports. She did cricket, she did tennis, she did gymnastics, she did netball. And I would always do my best to try and participate in similar things. Like I was in a special gymnastics class for people with disabilities. I did, cricket with her. I would throw the ball. I would like do the whole, actual throwing of the ball, like the hard ball. I would never hit it, but I would do all the throwing. And that was like my thing. I would do like the underarm and the overarm, like to help her practice at home. For anyone out there who's either listening to this on Spotify or watching on YouTube that has small children, and you have children that have a physical disability or a visual impairment, and they want to get into certain sports, finding ways to make the games accessible for me were always so important to my childhood growing up, because it allowed me to feel included, and that's something that a lot of disabled kids struggle with. I have so many good memories that I wouldn't have if teachers hadn't been so understanding and supportive of my needs and finding ways to adapt the different sports to make them easier for me to play. Thank you so much for listening, whether you're watching it on YouTube or listening on Spotify. Thank you so much, and I will catch you in the next episode. Bye!